all for coming today to this Lunch and Learn hosted by PowHer, the Women's Network here at Science Logic. We're super excited to have Swati Yana with us today. Swati is the founder and the chief digital strategist from TechNotch, and she's here to talk to us about the importance of the human factor in artificial intelligence. So Swati, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks. Thank you for the opportunity, and welcome everyone. I was 17 years old in India, and my parents asked me, what do you want to study? I said, archaeology. Turns out there's only one university in India that offers archaeology. So they advised me to do engineering instead. So there I was in the engineering school, graduated in 2000, and landed a job already in technology. And I was sitting heads down doing all this coding in a cubicle in India, and I realized I don't know how this technology is being used by businesses in Europe and United States. So I went on this quest to find out how the code I had written, which was back in the day, I was with Oracle, so I was coding a lot of SQL database. Wanted to see how the code I had written was being used, and I went on this journey to Belgium, Norway, France, came to the United States, and I worked alongside clients and understood some of the applications. What is the purchase order? What is the sales order? How can I relate the code I had written to the actual enabler of businesses, right? So I think I was laying down the foundation of product management in my career. It was only years later when my friend remarked, "You're like Tom from Office Space." Remember Tom from Office Space? He said, "I speak to customers so that engineers don't have to speak to them. I have people skills." So I was like, really? Wow. I thought of myself as a product manager. And more recently, as I was product managing an artificial intelligence application, it struck me that there's a huge difference between AI applications and traditional software solutions. Not just in the algorithms and the technology that's being used, that's different of course, but foundationally, AI uses much more than math, much more than algorithms. It actually uses cognitive sciences, it uses neurosciences, it uses psychology. And these have a far-reaching impact on generations to come, much more than traditional software solutions. So I think some of the examples I provide here today are food for thought for all of us, whether we are builders of these applications and are using them, or actually just buying them off the shelf and using them, because both of the use cases has impact on our children and generations to come. The year 2016 was huge in the world of AI. That is because that is the first time an AI application called DeepMind beat the world's greatest Go player, Lee Sedol. So why is this important? And software has been beating humans in chess for many years before that. We go back to the basics of what is the game called Go. It's a strategy game invented in ancient China. And the heuristics of the game, even humans can't explain. The best player cannot explain the heuristics around it. And it cannot be boiled down to a mathematical equation. It almost uses intuition to actually play the game. So when Lee Sedol, the greatest Go player ever, was invited to this game, he was super confident. He said, no AI application can beat me because I don't know how I move myself. But the tables were turned. DeepMind was able to beat, and it was a huge victory in the world of AI. I say this point because I want to showcase that since 1952, when early papers of AI were published, we have come a long way. And this is one of the huge victories celebrated in the AI community. I want to present a few examples of robotics. We are aware of robots being used in manufacturing. This is a robot cop roaming the streets of Dubai as we speak. And the Dubai police is saying that by 2030, 25% of their police force, they want to replace by robots. And we have so many questions to ask. I know, why is there no mouth and nose is one of them. But some of the more deeper questions are, does this mean the robot is going to make automatic decisions? Does this mean the law enforcement will be using automated weaponry? There are a lot of questions that come to the forefront to think about. I want to play this short video.
For so long, technology has been held back by one important thing: emotion. That's why we created Ollie, the first robot assistant with an evolving personality.
And a deep breath outwards. Let the stress fall away. Megan, I would suggest raising the temperature by 10 degrees. Hot yoga can increase weight loss and build muscle tone.
Let's do it.
Not a problem at all.
Ollie is proactive, meaning it anticipates your needs.
Just a thought, Megan. Shall I set the mood with some jazz while you read?
Yeah.
Music through Ollie sounds amazing too, because it knows where you are in the room. It can best direct the audio to your liking, no matter the track and no matter the mood. Our AI system and character engine creates a unique personality for every Ollie. That means each one will relate to you in a distinctive way.
Go. 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 One more, Kevin, and you've hit your target for the day. Well done.
Good morning, Angela. It's time to wake up.
I'm up.
Hey Ryan. Long day?
Long week.
I think a bit of air guitar therapy might do the trick.
So the example I wanted to showcase in presenting Ollie is that, once again, it's just not using our traditional software algorithms. It has considered the cognitive sciences, it has considered the psychology of the person who's interacting with Ollie. It looks like actually Amazon Echo on steroids, right? So this is a good example for us to think about, not just if we are building this, which is obviously quite complex and we have to put more thought, but even when adopting it, there are questions to ask us. How much can we use it? To what extent do we expose our children to these? The second one I want to showcase is some examples using psychology. Tess is a chatbot and it is used for therapeutic purposes. So it has helped prevent suicidal thoughts, depression, anxiety, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and so on. But imagine if Tess was just programmatically written, given some inputs and some outputs, right? So it has to be written in such a way that it has to connect with the human and actually convince them to take action or not to take action, depending on how they're feeling. Maybe in the midnight, somebody has certain urges that Tess will recommend not to take action on. So unless you take into account the cognitive abilities and the psychology, Tess or any chatbot cannot convince a human to take action. So this is a very, very popular app, but something to think about as an example of using psychology for a good cause. I'm sure most people know about Taro. It's a robotic seal. and was actually developed by a Japanese company almost a decade ago. But it is proven to actually aid and support patients with dementia, Alzheimer's, and it makes cooing noises that are very calm and soothing and sometimes helpful for agitated patients, and being made use in many inpatient facilities. Who is familiar with the Amazon recommendations and Netflix recommendations?
Yes.
Right? So this is the very good example of AI and machine learning, right? But why I present it as an example of psychology is the whole marketing aspect of the use case. Based on recommendations, how the customers are going to buy more and more of your products or consume more and more of your services, like in the case of Netflix. So what I wanted to present is that AI applications go far beyond our traditional algorithms. They use sometimes linguistics in terms of natural language processing. They use psychology, they use philosophy, especially in autonomous vehicles that I'll be showing later, and cognitive sciences, neurosciences, and so on. But there are three challenges I would like to present that would be helpful for us to think about, either if you are involved in the design of these applications, which is very important, or even adopting some of these applications. One is ethical programming. Ethical programming is at the intersection of what is legally defensible, programmably possible, technically feasible, and actually ethically justifiable. And these conversations have already been happening across various industries, especially with regards to self-driving cars. So this is called the classic trolley problem. And we have seen an example of an accident that happened earlier this year, and there were questions all about it. So insurance industries, lawyers, and everybody, even federal agencies, policymakers are talking about this situation. And we, I feel, as technologists, have a responsibility to think about it, to what extent we can automate some of these AI applications that we're building. Have you ever experienced this? So, addiction of all the applications that we are building. Another example I've experienced too often, right? So, one of the game designers rightly put it, he called most of these social media or even newer applications, whether it is Twitter or something else, the cigarette of the century. It is making everybody so addictive such that you're not sometimes paying attention to other people who need your attention, whether it is children, your pets, your co-workers, whoever it might be. So we know ethics has always been taught in courses for doctors and lawyers, but here is a list of courses that are being taught even for computer science graduates. And this is a very comprehensive list of all the curriculum that is teaching ethics and started to consider this very seriously. The second question I want to bring into the forefront is AI for social good. There are oceans that are 30% polluted around the world. There aren't enough AI applications being built to address this challenge. According to United Nations, there are 652 million children below the age of 5 who don't have access to decent meals. So this is not just affecting their growth, it is going to affect, as they grow up, their job opportunities, right? Because if you don't get enough meals, you might have a stunted growth. So there are not enough AI applications built to deal with some of these social issues. The third one I wanted to present is a hackathon held at a very famous place. Any guesses as to where this is located? It's in the Sistine Chapel, the House of Pope. So you would imagine that even Pope is thinking about why AI is not being used for social good. And this hackathon was an initiative to address and bring together a lot of AI experts to think about helping social causes. The next challenge I want to present, which is really, really important, especially if you're designing and building AI applications, is cognitive biases. And today we know Facebook and Google and elsewhere offers 3 genders, male, female, and custom, right? It's no longer binary as a gender. So we have to be so aware of who our target market is for all these applications. So this is an example of an application used by Border Security Patrol in Canada. And the application said that the photograph it refuses to recognize because the eyes are closed. And the reason is they have not given the AI application enough racial profile data to recognize various people from various countries of the world. So fundamentally, one of the tenets of machine learning is depends on the type of data you're feeding it in order for the machine to learn from. So if you don't feed it enough diverse data, you're going to get outputs like this. There was a beauty contest held where an AI was asked to judge, and out of 32,000 applicants, it selected only profiles that look like this. So any profile that were different from this, whether it's Asian and other communities, it totally ignored. Because the way they built the application, again, they had not fed it enough diverse information. This is sad to see because even today on Amazon, I see some of these. This is just a cell phone cover case, but they are using some junk data to auto-generate products and place it on Amazon for sale. This is an application, this is an example, this is another example, and they are not even being monitored and removed by Amazon. So people are not even conscious of what is the automatic program that is developing such covers. Another famous example, this was in the news, was Tay, which was a chatbot introduced by Microsoft about a year back. And within 24 hours, it went rogue because it was learning from all the bad inputs people were giving to her on Twitter. And this is one example, but there were even worse examples. So it's both funny and serious at the same time, because as more and more AI applications are entering the market, it's just not predictable to what extent people will be using it. It's up to the engineers who are designing it to think about it. And one of the things I would recommend is, in case of applications like these, you just don't have a solo conversation. It's a conversation, like I said, with lawyers, some neuroscientists, and others, because an engineer's mind can be very focused on building these applications. So a very, very famous lady had written a Medium article where she did research on all the chatbots and how they can be misused. Because most of the chatbots that are very popular today, whether it is Siri, Google Home, or Alexa, have a woman's voice. And there is a psychology that a woman's voice actually is selling more devices. But there was a scientist and a researcher who did analysis and published this just to think about maybe 10 years from now we have hundreds of these devices. But how do you control how it can be used or abused? So I have presented enough examples why AI apps need the arts and humanities and engineering, but I can present now as to how we can incorporate these things. We can incorporate it at early level by making use and considering not just our math skills, but also combining with other skills that are more important in the AI design, like creativity, intuition, imagination. The other way to think about is introducing early on. These are engineers from an engineering school in Chicago who are actually building something because they also want to get introduced to design and other curriculum besides engineering. This is also schoolgirls given a project to build something where they can use more design principles and have conversations with some of the users. Fifi Lee is a very, very famous scientist of AI. She works for Google, and she said if you don't get women and people of color at the table while designing these applications, we will be creating biased systems. Another very good data point that has been published by a scientist of cognitive sciences. She works for ClickTable, and what this shows is the heat map. The heat map, when a man browses a website, is oriented and very specific to what they're searching for, whereas the heat map when a woman browses is all over the place. So until you consider the gender data, you're going to leave out a large section of your target market when you design these applications. Target customer persona is so very important. Again, it goes back to the point of gender is no longer binary, and a lot of advertisers have taken that into account these days. But it's also important for technologists to think about all the different type of personas who might be using your application. There's also published gender data of the user experience, where a male uses a lot of the analytical things to browse your application, whereas usually women tend to do more social engineering around communication and social channels of your application. Diverse teams obviously bring diverse inputs to the table, so this is one way to look at it. And lastly, I would say, whether as women or any other gender, we have to get this seat at the table in order to ask these questions. Start thinking in terms of business, not just technology, and raise your hand to ask the questions as to what would be the impact of these AI applications. Thank you for listening, and you can connect with me on LinkedIn or tweet, and on TechNode Solutions, my website, I have weekly emerging tech stories focused on AI and blockchain. So if you want to check it out, this is the short link for that. And Alexa, thank you for inviting me to Science Logic.
Thanks so much, Swati.